Gather round, brothers and sisters, gather round, for I have a story to tell. I have been a man of God my whole life. I was born in Braintree, Massachusetts, and graduated Harvard College in 1800. Harvard College was the preeminent training ground for congregational ministry, and I began to preach at Freeport's first parish, and in 1806, they ordained me as just their second minister. My ordination ceremony was followed by revelry worthy of heaven above. The tavern bill was over $23 for the wine, beer, rum, brandy, and gin that the visiting ministers consumed. Sadly, my ministry in Freeport lasted but a few short years. In February 1809, as I lay ill in bed at the home of my mother-in-law, Mrs. George Bartle, at Porter's Landing, the house caught fire and burned to the ground, making dust of our well-kept church records. I was removed to safety, but I did not survive the exposure. So at age 30 years, I passed from the church militant to the church triumphant, blessing me with truly eternal rest. But the church I served is still here, First Parish Church, the congregation, that is. It's as old as the town itself. Both started in 1789, but this is not the building we had when I was in Freeport. That was down on Lower Main Street at the top of Concord Road, leading up from my home at Porter's Landing. That was just a plain white meeting house with clear glass windows and no musical instruments. The church forbade instruments of any kind in my day. But in 1818, they took that building down and sold the land to build a newer, larger building in what by then had become the center of town, up on the hill facing Bow Street, where that L.L. Bean fellow set up his shop some years later. Well, that building stood for 75 years, but it caught fire and burned to the ground. There were a lot of fires in the 1800s, don't I know it? But then the church built this building in 1895, all stained glass windows and even a pipe organ. Well, it's a far cry from the Puritan meeting house we had when I was here, but of all the buildings the church has had, this one has stood the longest, over 125 years. Now, let me tell you about young William Aldrich, the Freeport fellow who designed this building. William grew up visiting his grandfather's shipyard down on the Harrisseekit, and he saw how they fit together timbers and beams. When he graduated Freeport High School, he went to study architecture at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. And he came back to Maine and apprenticed with Mr. John Calvin Stevens. But this building is one of the first William designed all on his own. You see the timbers and knees that make up its frame? William borrowed that design from the ship carpenters. Well, William went on to win a large architecture prize for his designs that took him to Europe and back. So William's time in Freeport took him all over the world. Alas, my time took me only as far as the old Parish burying ground. You can find my stone there now.